It is my pleasure to welcome today's moderator, Sheila Warren, Head of Blockchain and Data Policy and member of the Executive Committee from the World Economic Forum. Sheila has represented banks, philanthropies, and progress nonprofits and designed and launched NGO Source, a service focused on international grant making. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you, Juliana, and bienvenido a todos. It is my incredible privilege and honor to be here today to moderate this session celebrating the launch of the COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center. At the World Economic Forum, unsurprisingly, we spent quite a bit of the last year focused on COVID-19 and helping to coordinate response around the world. And I am just absolutely thrilled to have this platform on which organizations and individuals will be able to find comprehensive data and information about how COVID-19 is transforming the world, led by the Global South, be made available to the world. This center is going to produce data-driven knowledge to inform decision makers, not just in the Global South, but all around the world. And to tell us more, I'd like to introduce Mr. Philip Shinrock, the founder and executive director of CEPEI. As we all know, CEPEI is an independent think tank based in Colombia. And over the last 16 years, Philip's provided policy solutions and insights in critical strategic areas that optimize organizational development, governance, finance, and data for sustainable development. Philip, over to you.
Good morning, Sheila, and thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center launch. As Sheila was mentioning, my name is Philip Schonroth, and I'm the director of CEPEI, and we are a Global South independent and non-profit think tank established in 2002 in Bogota, Colombia. And for almost 2 decades, we have promoted multi-stakeholder dialogue, generated evidence, and for more informed decision-making at all levels. Empowered the production and use of high-quality data across sectors and geographies for global agendas on sustainable development. And CEPEI is the COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center Secretariat. From now on, I will refer to it as the center. It was an honor, of course, for CEPEI to be called to lead this multi-stakeholder initiative we're launching today. And I would like to thank, of course, as well our panelists for being here today. But more than that, I really would like to say for the trust in CEPEI to deliver. And I would like also to thank our audience for joining us today, but especially those that are off hours in some parts of the world and have woken up today to see us and to join us in what is for us a very important moment to show you 3 things. The first one, what I would like you to take away from this event, it's why we actually created yet another platform when so many already exist around the world. Second, we have leveraged partnerships to do it. And how did we actually do it? It's a story that I would like to tell you. And third, how investing in our own internal data culture allowed us to build it fast and effectively. When the pandemic hit us by surprise, I would say to most of all, the United Nations provided a framework to implement the response and recovery plans in low and middle income countries. Most of the Global South countries are already working hard to implement the socioeconomic response to address COVID-19 emergency and recover from social, economic, environmental, and political impacts. In parallel, we as civil society actors can enhance development and humanitarian outputs and capacities by linking and connecting dots, facilitating accessibility and increasing data use by becoming a multiplier of data and also opening up dialogues through data. Data opens doors. So let me make a hard stop here and get back to basics, because we are telling you a story on how we are making this happening. But we have to go back to basics to see how to be a driver of action, create a data innovation center within weeks, and navigate also a Southern-based think tank through a pandemic that within days changed our modus operandi. And more boring to us, it put many colleagues and friends organizations in a critical situation of existence. So how do you actually make that possible to be a driver of action? You make it happen, and it's possible when you find the right partners and you have a team that delivers and inspires others. Specifically, what we needed was financial and technical support, not surprisingly, but it had to be, first of all, not restricted engagement. On the contrary, what we needed at that moment was to experiment, adjust, and in a nutshell, gain our partners' trust to get the job done by bringing our own experiences, tools, and mechanisms to work together with them. To do that virtually and to do that in record time was certainly not an easy task. We went into the living rooms, kitchens, rooftops, and gardens of our colleagues in order to actually meet and have the possibility through our virtual platforms to create something in weeks that usually would be created in a non-social distancing ambience where we gather, where we think together, and where we co-create. So what we actually did was that CEPEI, the United Nations COVID-19 Multi-Partner Trust Fund, the MPTF, Tableau, and almost 20 partners ideated this center. As the Secretariat, what we did is bring together data scientists, statisticians, programmers, but also economists, geographers, and more importantly, that they connect to the grassroots leaders to create the center. Our partnership strategy has always been a whole of society approach where we leverage existing partnerships and select new stakeholders for building the platform concepts, but also their fundamentals in their architecture. So we never work alone, and that's something good actually, because besides the partners that we have, CEPEI also has the privilege to count on a brain trust of advisors. Those who actually have in-depth knowledge of issues and an understanding of a value of a southern think tank contributing with independence, reliability, and the highest quality. So how do we actually partner and with whom? CEPEI methodologically identifies and brings new stakeholders to fill the gaps to our partners and audiences identify. And we emphasize specifically in this project on the local level and actors so that the center is an active link in a value chain of information and evidence. For example, in the last couple of weeks and months, we have invested very strongly in strengthening the data scientist South-South cooperation and emphasizing local level multi-stakeholder partnerships. So this is why we actually brought together scientists from Africa and Latin America that have been working together for the last 2 years so that they actually help us now to trigger this process and put this expertise into the center. That is our partnership with the African Institute of Mathematical Science. And we know incredible data poets and data rock stars for social good. We are romantics, we love the bohemian digital movement, so we also connect to experts on the private sector with data journalists, and that also played an essential role in the COVID-19 recovery. With them, together, the center has harnessed the power of data in narratives. They have created stories and visualizations so that people, everyday people, could incorporate this knowledge in their decision-making processes. This is why we have been partnering with the ITC ILO Training Center in Turin, who has become a partner, and together we're launching the first sets of data stories in children education and new forms of assimilating learning processes during confinement and the subsequent return to the classroom. I believe something essential and very interesting to any of those who have not only children, but are responsible to taking important decisions for them and with them. Together with our partners, what have we done in the last couple of weeks in order to build this center, in order to bring it to life and to present it to you? We have set up a data laboratory that consists already of 62 data marts, which are part of 12 data sets with more than 85 data pipelines, or in English, information flows, along with 3 master data. So going with all these flows of data and information, we have already created over 40 dashboards and geovisioners for more than 200 variables adequately organized to support this first phase of our COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center. What else have we done? We have developed a global data portal and a set of our initial national data terminals based in the same data lake conceptual and technical design. We want to continue, of course, developing those data terminals with the support of the national statistical offices in the countries that we're working, and with the broader national statistical systems, stakeholders in as many countries as possible. We have enriched the data gathering, processing, and also the consolidation process at local level, and carefully, very carefully, organized geographically information, facilitating conversations between the local, the national actors, and also the global scales. So it is worth underlining the node strategy, which is our model's foundation and distinct feature. And it is reliable and scaling our strategy. We consider that this node strategy delivers solutions based on data, information, and knowledge to policymakers and direct impacts of the communities. Our local level partners around the world are, of course, technically capable, rooted in the communities, or they're facilitating us to participate in a contemporary information methodologies and social platforms to bring it closer to them. Our pilot project, it's already in the happening. It is in the Colombian Pacific coast, and we are partnering with the University of ICESI in Cali, Colombia, and with Decidim in Barcelona. This horizontal concept, the interoperability, is the most crucial pillar to organize data and information. At the center, we used all of Mapbox and Tableau's tools, potentials, and capabilities to enhance our data, information, knowledge processes, and of course, facilitate user accessibility. The user accessibility has been our main driver ever since. In closing, of course, I can say that I'm proud to put in service a flexible model that leaves no one behind and considers that all audiences as potential users, that means you, and facilitates access to data, information, and knowledge required for evidence-based policies and implementation. So what actually comes next? The MPTF, it's a time-bound initiative, but the center is not. Also, we are created to respond to a specific crisis. Our center exists to drive decision-making so well, all can recover better together. This is not an abstract concept, I would say. At the end, it's about our lives, it's the lives of our people and of our communities. So as we move forward, we welcome your comments and ideas. Last but not least, my gratitude goes to all of those that make this a reality. Diego, Luisa, Julian, Marisol, Roy, Alexandra, Pablo, Juanita, Vivian, David, Valentina, Freddy, and Julian, and last not Hernan. And I could go on, Sheila, forever, but having said that, I thank you for your time. It has been for me an honor and also a big pleasure. And I will leave you now with a short video presenting the center, and immediately after that, Sheila, our stellar moderator, for an energizing conversation with great leaders who are in the panel. It has been our pleasure. Thank you, gracias to you. And now over for the video to actually synthesize in 3 minutes what I have tried to tell you in 10. So over to you, and it has been a pleasure. Thank you.
The world has doubled down on its efforts to respond and recover from the COVID-19 crisis. We need global, regional, and national information to build back better. Data to inform decision makers and those who influence them. Data to provide evidence for resources to flow where they are critically needed, and data for tracking the impact of each country's response and recovery strategies. At the COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center, we produce data-driven knowledge from the South to the world. There are a multitude of ideas to improve national and local plans for socioeconomic and environmental recovery. We could do a better job at connecting these ideas. This gap from thinking to action is a barrier to better decision-making. By making connections between diverse ideas for recovery that leave no one behind, the Center brings a unique value to the development community. Developed in partnership with the UN COVID-19 MPTF, the Center provides evidence to optimize available resources allocation, both from the UN MPTF and other sources, to fill the gaps caused by the pandemic in low and middle income countries. In these uncertain times, we are creating new ways to present a complete country-by-country view of the recovery and share this data with the world. data analytics and innovation. We make sense of data sources and information flows to support a robust response and recovery policy designs, program implementation, and evaluations. We produce timely insights and actionable recommendations. Multi-stakeholder partnerships. We never work alone. We connect to stakeholders at every level, working on the non-health dimensions of COVID-19's impact in communities worldwide. We ideate, launch, and grow partnerships. Open data is a space designed and created for full and permanent access to all information available in the Data and Innovation Center for analysis and research of COVID-19 dynamics in the Global South's response and recovery processes. The Global Data Terminal is an information platform connecting high-quality traditional and non-traditional data and information flows. It contains a broad set of data that comes from structured sources of information from multiple countries. National data terminals are platforms for tracking the impact of each country's response and recovery strategies. Besides the data, the platform strengthens an information gathering process deeply rooted in local context to enrich a global view. Node terminal, tailor-made to articulate local needs with policy decision makers and stakeholders. It promotes a participatory process, supports advanced data analytics, informs policy implementation, and encourages innovation. It is a space for collaboration, co-creation, and knowledge sharing. Country profiles and recovery plans present information focused on COVID-19 response and recovery issues and themes specific to each nation. Data analytics. Data stories. Policies and document. A special thanks to all our partners for believing in data, knowledge, and innovation to recover better together.
Well, I think it's very clear how critical and important data is and is going to continue to be to moving us past this pandemic and into recovery. And someone who's uniquely qualified to speak about the importance not just of access to data, but of actually making that data useful and usable, being able to analyze it and visualize it in ways that can really move the needle on recovery, is Mr. Adam Selipsky, the president and CEO of Tableau. Tableau, of course, is the interactive data visualization software company that is transforming business intelligence and the way that people use data to solve problems. Prior to his role as the head of Tableau, Adam spent over a decade building Amazon Web Services, which of course is one of the world's most successful technology platforms. He'll be speaking to us about the pandemic and data culture. Adam.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. Well, it's really an honor and a thrill to be with all of you today, everybody in the audience, all these really distinguished panelists. And so I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be together doing this. Tableau has a very simple 7-word mission statement. We help people see and understand data. And that means all people everywhere, for every reason. It includes big enterprises, it includes individual entrepreneurial analysts, small businesses, educational institutions, governments, nonprofits around the world, all people doing all things with data, because we believe that we're going to collectively make the world a better place through data. And that's really what gets myself and all the people I work with up in the morning and coming to work every day, or at least coming to their computers to work every day. So this year has been an unusual year. If you look at the role of data, that's certainly true as well. I think the trend of more and more data and the criticality of data has been around for a number of years. We've been talking about how we're entering the age of analytics ubiquity for a while now. But 2020 really accelerated it, certainly put a fine point on it, and I think made very obvious the role of data in the world and where we're heading. And of course, that came first and foremost through COVID. And really, you see it everywhere, including in the public zeitgeist. Even the term "flattening the curve," that's a data concept. And now there are, I assume, hundreds of millions or billions of people in the world who know what that means. And it's just one little indicator of where data is heading. But more seriously and more specifically, we saw it all over with COVID. The importance for governments, for health systems, for companies, for individuals of tracking and trying to make intelligent decisions in a rapidly changing environment. We saw that in public health. One little story is we worked very closely with both the state of New York and the city of New York, and standing up a COVID response system, really over a several-day period. I think a non-sleeping several-day period. And I've gotten to know the chief analytics officer of New York City, and she can just tell amazing stories about how through the systems that they stood up, the data systems, which happened to run through Tableau, how they were actually understanding which locations, which hospitals in New York City had available intensive care unit, ICU beds, and in real time knowing where to route ambulances in order to make use of those available beds. So literally, ambulances were being routed to hospitals with people with critical illness based on data and the use of analytics to route them there. It's a very powerful story. You see this all over. Obviously, it's not just the US. Places like the Ministry of Health in Senegal, another real success story. Their Ministry of Health's Emergency Operations Center is using data to manage the country's response and to provide community level care, and is doing an incredible job, which is being recognized internationally. Now, it's not, of course, only about health. We had another big crisis. One of several crises this year was the economic crisis, and how everything changed for so many different types of businesses, and the economic difficulty faced by so many different types of businesses in the face of the pandemic. So I think for most companies, if you didn't think you were a digital business before 2020, you certainly are now, and you certainly know that you are now. In fact, McKinsey & Company put out a report saying that digital transformation accelerated from what it would normally happen in 5 years to 8 weeks. 5 years of digital transformation in 8 weeks. And of course, everything digital creates data. Any digital transformation is a data transformation. So we saw this in every industry as retailers had only online, as semiconductor, chip manufacturing operations, instead of doing site visits, had to rely completely on online data and stood up new systems to assess quality control. And we're, again, another area that we're really privileged to work in. And so I think in summary for this piece, 2020 has just shown beyond a doubt that all organizations of all sizes in every country, in every area, need to create data capabilities, need to know how to analyze their data. And in order to do that, in order to thrive in this environment, one thing we've learned from working for over 15 years around the world with really every type of organization is that, of course, it's about the technology, and that's important, but it's not only about the technology. Very importantly, and very difficult to achieve, is the need to create a data culture. And technology is an enabler of that data culture, but fundamentally this means that organizations are reshaping how they're organized, how people think, how they interact with each other, and how data really moves to the center of so many of the decisions that they're making and the conversations that we're having. And this is a big concept. It's a subtle concept. I would argue it's actually harder at the end of the day than the technology, even though we still have a lot of work to do on the technology on our side. But it's some subtle things, and that's why it's difficult. But we have seen a few things that companies and organizations who are creating a data culture do, and I thought I would share just a few of those with you today. First, they invest in data skills. So people need to be data literate in order to effectively work with data. And you see public policy entities playing an enormous role here, supporting data literacy efforts in schools, investing in retraining efforts for the workforce. And that's just one of many reasons why I'm so excited about the COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center that CEPE is launching today. It's not just about making about making data accessible, but ensuring that people have the ability to understand and to work with it. And we're thrilled to be working together with you in this effort. And I know it's just getting going, but we're very excited about it. A second element of data culture is building a data community. And it's critical to drive and reinforce the kind of organizational change that we're talking about. People need to be inspired. They need to be taught. They need to be supported. And we have a worldwide Tableau community, which is ready at a moment's notice to jump up and help people. But it's also really important inside of an organization to have a lot of these reinforcement mechanisms, to have centers of excellence, to have internal user community, to have office hours, to have fun contests around data and around analytics. And we spent a lot of time with some of our more sophisticated customers and partners talking about how to build that community element inside of their organizations. And then third, every organization has to find a balance of data access and data governance. And some people think these two concepts have to be at odds with each other. Are we going to provide access to data for everybody, or are we going to govern and be safe and be secure? And I know as somebody at a leading tech company, I know that we can and we have to play a role in helping with the data skills and in supporting data communities. But we certainly also have to help with this balance between data access and data governance. So I thought it might be useful just to talk about some of the technological trends and also some of the balance points between accessibility and governance, essentially where the future of analytics is going in some dimensions. So if we just turn to access first, we're looking at the role that AI is playing in advanced data science and making it usable for the everyday business users. Things like NLP, AI-supported search and recommendations are all really important. So you can find your existing analytics in your organization. One of the biggest problems is often not knowing where to look, not knowing what's even possible, and to find data sets that are useful and certified and validated. And we're also looking at how to make analytics more intuitive and more engaging. Going forward, as we go from millions to tens to hundreds of millions of knowledge workers around the world using analytics, it can't only be about analysts. It certainly can't only be about data scientists and statisticians. It's got to be about every knowledge worker finding analytics to be accessible. So we want to, instead of asking people to learn how the software thinks, we want to have the software learn how people think. So we're creating these highly intuitive experiences. We're creating natural language querying capabilities so that there's not a big learning curve. It should really be as simple as spreadsheeting. It should be as simple as word processing over time. And that's the high bar that we're setting for ourselves. So as I mentioned, the other part of this equation is governance. And there's a lot of sensitive data. There's personal data, there's confidential company data, there's national security data. And all of that absolutely just cannot be left out in the wild. And so what we often see is organizations, because they don't know how to govern sort of with a light touch, we basically see a big clampdown where we say, okay, we're only going to give people access to data that they can prove that they need. And that unfortunately takes away the power of exploration, of people exercising creativity, of folks asking questions that none of the rest of us thought to ask. And until we free them to ask those questions, we won't really be able to harness the true power of data. But we've got to also be able to govern it. And so we're putting, and I think the whole industry is putting, a big focus on data management, on security, on data cataloging, so you can understand what are all the columns and rows across my organization, across all of my data sources. And how can you have these tools to provide access, but also restrict access, and to ensure that data is safe and reliable and that you can trust it. So in a well-tuned governance model, you actually end up expanding access to data precisely because you have control. That's the seeming paradox, which is actually the most freeing thing of all. Increased governance allows you to expand access. It gives you control to know who can see what. It increases your confidence in the data and your confidence in the management of the data. And so, of course, that creates a virtuous cycle. When people trust the data and trust its management, they're willing to use it for decision-making. And they're also more willing to share the data, to give other people access to it. And they have confidence that it's going to be managed and secure, and that it's going to be shared responsibly. And most importantly, we've got to continue to give our customers the power to fine-tune the balance between these two. I can't tell you what the right balance is for every organization. It all depends on what you're trying to get done, the types of employees, the types of data you have. Every organization really has a different balance that's right for them, and we do spend a lot of time working with organizations to help them try and find that balance. So I'll just say in closing that while we're working across really every industry, geography, and use case, nothing is closer to our hearts than working with governments and nonprofits around the world. We're very privileged to be working with CEPE, to work with the UN. We work closely with the World Food Program, who of course just awarded the Nobel Prize. And we're very humbled, but excited about our roles in working with all of you to try and literally solve some of the biggest problems in the world. And we believe that data can and will help do that. And we're extremely optimistic that we will collectively make progress against the biggest challenges in the world through data. And we're just another shoulder at the wheel of that progress. And it's a privilege to be working with all of you. Thank you.
Adam, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today. At the forum, as the head of data policy, I tell everyone of our constituents, every company is a data company, like you said, and every government needs to be thinking very much right now actively about how they're going to help their citizens access the digital economy and to empower them to think about how they are sharing and using their data. So a question I have for you is for everyone listening today, you've spoken about the importance of creating a data culture. And certainly that has a corporate or business element to it, but it also has a societal element to it. And so I'm curious, what is one thing that everyone listening today can do to help support the creation of societal data culture?
Well, it's going to be a big effort. So you've challenged me to come up with one, but I think that helping to support data literacy is a big deal. And I think that starts in educational institutions. We, for example, work with the government of Singapore on a national analytics competition. The interesting part is that it includes middle schoolers. And so now you have middle schoolers in these national analytics competitions. And if you fast forward 15 years and those middle schoolers are in the workforce, that's the kind of data literacy we're going to want. And so I really encourage everyone, whether you work for a corporation, a government, for a nonprofit, to be helping us all to solve the problem of how do we get data literacy into universities, into high schools, and all the way into middle schools and primary schools. And I think once we do that effectively, we'll really be growing the next generation of analysts, whether they know that they're analysts or not.
Thank you so much, Adam. And our hope is that next generations can definitely have more of that fluency and understand the roles that they play in the data ecosystem. I'm now going to turn to Anita Bhatia and Lady Akizimana for a panel conversation. Anita is the Deputy Executive Director of Resource Management, Sustainability, and Partnerships of UN Women. She's had a distinguished career at the World Bank Group, serving in various senior positions in leadership and management, including as a Director of Global Partnerships for the IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. Lydia Akizimana is the CEO of AIMS, the African Institute for Mathematical Science. She's also the founder and CEO of Happy Hearts, a chain of preschools in Rwanda, and the co-founder of Drakar Limited, a publishing house that serves more than 3,000 schools in Rwanda. It's my great pleasure to have you both here today. I'll invite each of you to make some opening remarks and follow up with a panel conversation. Anita, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much. And I want to start by just congratulating CEPE, Philip, and his team, and all the partners that he has mobilized for the launch of this amazing platform. So really well done to you guys. And I'm really pleased that UN Women is a partner in this initiative. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can take the data that comes out of this platform and really use it to benefit the women and the girls of the world so that the recovery from the pandemic is actually allowing us to build back equal, not just build back better, but to build back equal. I want to say a few words about why gender data is so important and why we are so excited about the launch of this platform. I think everyone here knows why gender equality is important, but I think people don't often think about the link between equality and data. And so I want to say two things. First of all, as Adam so eloquently told us, data is so important for decisions. Data changes people's minds. So I could go blue in the face talking about the impact of the pandemic on women and how negative it has been. But it's not until I have data, and ideally beautifully visualized data, to make the case that you really change the hearts and minds of people. Because in the end, gender equality is fundamentally about changing attitudes, changing norms, and changing culture. So when I say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that 865 women fell out of the labor force in September compared to 200,000 men, people understand the impact of the care economy in a way they simply don't when I say, by the way, the care burden is really impacting women. So we need data to continue to push in the fight for gender equality because it changes minds. The second thing I want to say about gender data and what UN Women is doing about this is that all of the gender assessments, all of the data we are collecting is absolutely fundamental to prioritization, because right now governments are swamped and they are dealing with multiple fallouts from the pandemic, and their priorities are to deal first and foremost with, rightly so, the public health impacts of the crisis and the economic impacts. But in that equation, women get lost. So it's only when I have data that we can actually talk to governments about why they need to prioritize and to make the link to public policy interventions that can change the lives of women and girls. So with that, back to you, Sheila, and thank you. And really delighted to be here with you, Lydia, Adam, Philip, and others.
Thank you so much, Anita. I'm the daughter of a cardiologist who drilled into my head that health outcome data and medical data, I always had to examine the study to see who was being surveyed. And it was routinely men of a certain age from Northern European backgrounds. And so from a very young age, I had that sense that there was an unfairness in the data that we were getting access to as a society that was leading to some major decisions in the world. And so it's one of the reasons I'm just absolutely thrilled to have something like this center that's going to elevate the access to data and the ability to really analyze and visualize data from the South. But Liddy, let's turn to you and then we'll open up to a panel. But let's start with your remarks, please. I think you're on mute, Liddy. There we are.
Thank you very much, Sheila, for having me. I'm very excited to be on this panel and talk about the importance of data, especially at AIMS. Just a little bit of background information. The African Institute of Mathematical Sciences was established in 2003 as the first Africa's network of Center of Excellence in Mathematical Sciences. We really enabled the continent's youth to shape the continent's future through science, technology, engineering, and math, and by training Africa's next generation of leaders. So we have 5 centers on the continent, in South Africa, Senegal, Ghana, Cameroon, and Rwanda. The use of data is one topic that is so important for our continent, and today more than ever. We cannot plan if we don't have access to data. We cannot solve problems if we don't have access to data. So data is really critical for us to not only understand, but to make sure also our students, our governments understand the importance of using data in policy making, in planning for the future. I'm really excited to be on the panel today and discuss about what AIMS is doing during this pandemic, not only in terms of training of young people on the continent, but also in terms of providing solution on how we can solve this problem around the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Back to you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Liddy. Certainly the AIMS-CEPE partnership is an example of a very effective South-South partnership that's creating knowledge that's going to support COVID-19 recovery. And so my first question to both of you, and maybe we'll start with you, Liddy, in responding, is what makes such partnerships effective? And can you speak to what, maybe focusing specifically on the AIM-CEPE partnership, how do we encourage more of these kinds of partnerships to be created? And how can we create a more of an enabling environment for these kinds of partnerships to flourish? Liddy, we can start with you and then go to Anita.
Okay. So the use of data for public good, and especially towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, constitutes a growing common interest for a number of Global South organizations, which often have minimal representation in the global platform. So in May 2018, AIMS and CEPE signed a 5-year partnership agreement to support capacity building between the two institutions. This partnership provides a formal collaborative framework for both organizations to promote innovation with the main goal of helping Africa and Latin America to better prepare for and respond to capacity building challenges in emerging digital technologies, including big data, open data, and solving problems related to development. So for the past 2 years, CEPE has offered work placement to 2 AIMS students each year, charting a path for our cooperative education students to travel to Colombia and build their competencies by working on real-life projects. This is really important. So based on the above background, I believe the South-South Partnership technical cooperation among countries in the Global South is even more relevant in this COVID-19 era. Partnership for the goals, SDG 17, for example, is indispensable for the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. It is imperative for states, institutions, international organizations, academics, civil society, and the private sector to collaborate and share knowledge, lessons learned, and best practices in order to tackle the coronavirus. And I believe the COVID-19 Data Innovation Center is a giant step for Global South cooperation.
Thank you. And Anita, do you have thoughts on that enabling environment? How can we encourage this type of cooperation?
Yeah, I mean, look, for us, working with member governments is really fundamental because they have a very big role to play in changing gender equality outcomes, but also the private sector. And I think there, the partnerships that we've established are critical because it shows commitment. And it also allows us to bring different data sources to the table. So we have just launched with UNDP the Global Policy Response Tracker, which shows you of all the different policy measures that governments are undertaking, how many of these actually have a gender lens to them? And, what does that gender lens look like? So, that's an example of a more, within the family partnership, if you like, within the UN family. But you'd be amazed at how many differences there are in data sources, even between UN family organizations. So just getting that clarity of common objective is really important. But also, I think, when I think to some of our private sector partners, it's a way not just to put our data sources together, but more importantly, create an impetus for action. Because sometimes it's only when, a large financial institutions, yesterday I was talking to one of the largest banks in the world, and the person I was talking to was saying that they had just started to look at how good a job they do or not of recruitment, something as simple as recruitment of women. And, what was the change from the stock to the flow in terms of creating senior female leaders. And, it's that kind of a partnership which is really important to change behaviors, incentives, and culture. And then when you look at the COVID situation and the socioeconomic problems that countries are facing today, it is just so obvious that the world is divided into, for women, those women who have access to the digital world and those women who don't have access. So that digital divide is so crucial today, even more than it was before the pandemic. And having data that shows how big that divide is, but also how it's possible to address it, is so critical, because unless we address that digital divide, we're actually not going to be able to build back better and build back equal.
Thank you for that. We heard Adam speak about the importance of data culture and how complicated it is to actually create data culture. And that is true whether it's within the kind of fictional walls of a corporation or whether it is societally led by a government or an academic institution or others. And I'm curious what you see the role of the Global South, really speaking broadly, being in the creation of a global data culture, and what you see the role of partnerships, South-South partnerships being in helping to support that kind of culture. I'll add, we know that one of the big issues with data is not just access, it's access in a format that makes the data usable. You know, as a former lawyer, there was a strategy called the data dump, where you basically flooded the other attorneys' offices with so much information. It was impossible, the needle in the haystack proverbially, it was impossible to find the information that was important to make the case. And that is certainly something we've seen as we have more and more access to more and more data. How do we create a culture that helps to emphasize or surface that data that actually can lead to insight? I'll pass the question to either of you. Anita, yeah, please begin.
Did you want to ask Adam? No, please, Adam.
No, to you, Anita. To you.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. Look, I think we have to go back to first principles and why we're here in the first place, and that is the SDGs. And I think, you know, when we think about getting close to 2030 and the decade of action, we have to say, you know, how are we going to create an impetus for accelerated action unless we recognize how far along we are on that SDG journey? And the sad thing is, there are many SDGs where we are, gender equality is but one of them, where we are not far enough along. And that's why there is actually an SDG on partnerships, because it is only when we create public-private partnerships and multi-stakeholder alliances that include our member states in the UN, but also the private sector, young people, civil society, that we can really get that kind of whole of society and whole of world approach that is needed to bring that sense of urgency to solving for some of the multiple new problems that we had. We had plenty of problems before the pandemic, and, you know, had the SDGs really been invested in, then probably we would not be in as bad a situation as we are today. However, knowing that when there are partnerships, you can advance on key objectives actually should give us hope, because if we bring that multi-stakeholder approach to problem solving, including to solving the problem of data, we can actually hope to break through, and to do so with the sense of urgency that we need, given that we're only 10 years away from the SDGs.
Liddy? I think you're on mute. Did you want to add anything?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah, I was just
It's not really good.
Yeah, I was just asking how we could actually, how the Global South can help support the creation of a global data culture, and if there are elements in the Global South that we need to be surfacing and raising as we think about the creation of a data culture.
Oh, I totally echo what Anita said about partnerships and making sure that, you know, there is a public-private partnership. We need to make sure that, especially for a continent like Africa, where the majority of the young people are young, we need to make sure that not only they understand those data, but the data needs to be accessible. The private sector should be playing a big role here, not only working with the government, but also
Thank you so much, Liddy, for those remarks. I appreciate that, and we'll close out the panel there. Thank you again to Anita. It's my great pleasure to introduce our final speaker of the day. Madame Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN and Chair of the UN Sustainable Development Group. She is a diplomat and politician with more than 30 years of experience in the public and private sectors. And of course, she was Ban Ki-moon's Special Advisor for Development Planning and the Minister of the Environment in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us today, Madam Deputy Secretary. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and probably best known for being a partner in crime with Philip. So it's great to see you all, and it's wonderful to be at this launch for the COVID-19 Data and Innovation Center. It's been in the making for a while, but it's come just at the right time. And with the second and third waves of the pandemic that are unfolding in countries around the world, I think it's become even more important for us to have accurate and inclusive data and information at our fingertips so that our response does represent the multifaceted crisis that we're up against, starting with health, but very quickly it became a socioeconomic crisis as well. And it was great to hear Anita speaking to some of those many issues that we have talked about and tried to include in the work that we've been doing over the last 9 to 10 months, just staying alive and responsive to many of our clients in the countries. Clearly recovering, we've all been talking about how you swiftly recover better. And I think we're still in the response mode. And that response is what we're saying needs to be really deeply rooted in looking at the disaggregated data that one would need to make sure our stimulus packages have the right investments that set the track for us recovering better. So it is important for every single one of the SDGs. I think Anita went back to first principles. The framework of Agenda 2030 is really where it's at. And what we had said we were not on track before COVID. Now the opportunity of COVID can actually put us back on track, but we've got to know where we're coming from and where we need to go to. Every actor is going to count. Our governments are important. They've been holding and anchoring data and statistics for a while, but communities, businesses, civil society, and citizens are also mobilizing now and need to be key players as we respond to what is a historical crisis. And the mobilization has to be, again, I would say more urgency, more scale is what our countries are asking us. And I was visiting West Africa, 5 countries in the last couple of weeks. And it's the message to us all. This is happening real time and you really need to respond quickly and more targeted. So we will need to have more credible, accessible and disaggregated data, but also a data culture. And I think that this really has to start with our young people who are so engaged with technology. That's their tool of now and the future, and how to bring data, and we see it, big data, into our rooms, into our work, and into the investments that we make that should be more targeted. Young people have got a big role to play here, and I hope that we will see them engage much more. The critical role that civil society needs to play, and around the world, CSOs, all shapes and forms are involved in every facet of the response, and they are capturing and sharing the realities on the ground. We often say they may, maybe our representatives of people are in the parliaments, and we can argue about that as to the quality of it. But I think what is absolutely certain is that civil society feels the pulse of what is on the ground and the issues that are most important to people. And that's what we want to try to connect, is that bringing those issues to the fore as we examine stimulus packages, as we invest in the response, so that we have a much more durable recovery going forward. There are many examples of this. There is a Timor-Leste example where civil societies help monitor the government cash distribution program to vulnerable families. And it's follow the money. And that will be done with technology, but it also has to be plowed back into a data system that can actually hold government accountable and make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind, willingly or otherwise. Through our socioeconomic response plans, and SEPI has been very much involved in trying to help us be fit for purpose for this. We've taken on development as an emergency and really putting women and children, young people all at the center of this, recognizing the informal sector for what it is, which for me is the glue in the hardware that we put together in shaping our economies, but often not given its place. And now that you see lockdowns take that out, I think we need to look at some of the examples where we use the COVID opportunity to migrate many businesses in the informal sector onto technical platforms. But to do that, you really needed to have robust data to make it work. It's a big issue for inclusion. It is the leave no one behind agenda. And I think it's very important that as we're looking to the root causes of what brought us to this place in the beginning, the weak systems we had, the lack of inclusion, all of that, tells the narrative of the data that we have currently. It could be so much deeper and more impactful if we did much more. So while we've got a race to the vaccine, and we hope that happens, I mean, it's happening, we're seeing it in a couple of countries, but before it gets to us, it will take some time in developing countries. I think what is more of a concern for us is that the impact of COVID has left a lasting crisis, which will take a couple of years more than the delivery of a vaccine, and that's the socioeconomic crisis. And so again, here, with the promise of the 2030 agenda, with the data that we must understand better, we must be disaggregated. I think that this Data and Innovation Center is going to do an awful lot for us. It will identify how we can quickly course correct. And as I said just earlier, the initial problems that caused the situation in the first place, we know: inequality, poverty, the lack of access to strong systems. So you have a strong role to play in the recovery of this crisis. I look forward to being part of the advocacy to ensure that it is well funded, because it has a huge impact, which I hope will be, as you talk about this center in this region, that it goes from region to region, and that we are able to address consumers all around the world, where the center tells the real story of the issues we must grapple with, and the investments we must make at scale and with a sense of urgency. In the end, that makes it good for the 2030 agenda, makes it good for billions of people, especially, I would say, our women and our young people. So thank you again, Sepai, for the contribution to this global response. It truly is one. And I look forward to the continuing collaboration that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary, for your remarks and your support of this effort and giving us your time today. And I want to thank all of our panelists, all of our speakers today for sharing your time. Adam Silipsky, Anita Bhatia, Liddy Akizimana, and of course, Philip Shunrock, our erstwhile leader of SEPI, who spearheaded this entire effort. I think it's really clear from the remarks we heard today, it's going to take a village, as they say, to really move us forward and move us into this recovery phase, whether as we respond to the advent of vaccines and medications and more increased transparency around health outcomes and health data. There is a lot of work to be done. So all of you participating today are already helping in this effort. And I encourage you to take advantage of the new opportunities that the Data Innovation Center is going to provide, the new access to data from across the Global South, the new ways of visualization and analytics that you can use in your own individual decision-making to help shape that broader data culture that as a global society we're going to need to move beyond this pandemic into the new world that it's going to create. So with that, thank you all so much for your attendance today and for your attention. Thank you again to all of our speakers, and I wish you all a very safe, healthy, and happy rest of your week. Thank you so much.